Lesson 6:10, Entropy and the second law of thermodynamics. Entropy is defined as the amount of energy not available for work, and it's related to the amount of disorder in the universe. The more disorder, the more entropy, or the more entropy, the more disorder. The change in entropy is the amount of heat transfer over the temperature, and your temperature needs to be in Kelvin. The second law of thermodynamics can be written in terms of entropy. It says the total entropy of the system either increases or remains constant for any pressure. Entropy never decreases. Now, for one part of the system, entropy may decrease, but over the entire system, entropy will always increase or stay constant. So if you make something more ordered, then somewhere else something had to get much less ordered. Spontaneous processes always result in an increase of entropy, less order, more disordered, and less energy available to do work. So the work unavailable is the change in entropy times the temperature. Let's say 1200 joules of heat flows spontaneously through a copper rod from a hot reservoir to a cold reservoir. Determine the amount by which this irreversible process changes the entropy of the universe, assuming no other changes occur. All right, so our change in entropy is the heat over the temperature. But we have two heats. We have from the hot reservoir, and we have the cold reservoir. So we need to add those together. So the heat that goes from the hot, it's flowing out of or from or out of the hot reservoir. So the hot reservoir is losing 1200 joules at a temperature of 650 Kelvin. The cold reservoir is gaining 1200 joules, so it's positive at its temperature of 350 Kelvin. So the hot is negative joules because it's losing that. The cold is positive joules because it's gaining that. Run that through your calculator, and you get 1.6 joules per Kelvin. Find the change in entropy that results when a 2.3 kilogram block of ice melts slowly at 273 Kelvin. All right, so our change in entropy is our heat over the temperature. And this one, we're not worrying about temperature or heat transfer. It's just the ice is just melting. All right, so for ice melting, our heat is the latent heat of fusion. Our mass is 2.3 kilograms. Latent heat of fusion for water or ice is 3.35 times 10 to the 5th joules per kilogram. And our temperature is 273 Kelvin. Run that through your calculator, and you get 2.8 times 10 to the 3rd joules per Kelvin. So notice that's a lot more than when the heat flowed through the rod. So melting ice causes a lot less heat be available for work than just transferring the heat from one side of a rod to another. That's a 3, not a 5. All right, in the origins of life, your book goes into a great effort to talk about this. And So let's think about it. If the entropy or disorderliness of the universe increases for spontaneous processes, how do we justify evolution, which means getting it's more orderly? But really, I'm not even talking about evolution. Evolution is life changing. What I'm talking about more is the origins of life. Where did the first life start? All right. So the evolutionists have this need for something, some way where life started. But they start by assuming God doesn't exist. We can't have divine intervention. So here's how it works. Well, when energy is put into something, it can decrease the energy for that thing. But the total entropy of the universe increases. So they say the sun is giving energy to the earth into some chemicals and whatever. And so it allows for the entropy for that little bit of stuff to decrease, and it becomes more orderly. But overall, the sun giving out the heat causes a total entropy increase in the universe. All right, that would mean that spontaneously making something that absorbs energy to do some unspontaneous process. So we're actually having this energy come in, and they wanted to create more complex molecules and create a living thing that we can't duplicate in the lab at all. Even under what we assume as ideal conditions, we can't make things live. In fact, if you take a living cell, which has everything life needs, kill it, break it up, you can't put it back together. So, in other words, origins of life needs a miracle. The miracle is defined as something that doesn't happen, or doesn't usually happen, seems to be breaking the physics or the laws of nature. That's a miracle. Well, then the evolutionists need a miracle for their origins of life, because we can't duplicate it. It doesn't really fit the laws of nature. I mean, it hasn't happened since. So they have a miracle. Whether they believe God did it or not, there's some sort of miracle. As Christians, we use a similar idea, only we say God gave energy and created this highly organized creation. And ever since he made that creation has been falling apart, following the idea of entropy. So we started as highly organized, and it's been getting more and more messed up, more and more disorderly ever since. So here's the question. Why do spontaneous processes not decrease entropy? Why can't something spontaneous make it more organized? Well, a system can have several parts, and all those parts have several ways they can be organized. It's much more common to get less organized combinations. So let's think about flipping 5 coins. We have what are called macro states. So just looking at them, we could have like 5 heads, or 4 heads and 1 tail, or 3 heads and 2 tails, and so on. 2 heads, 3 tails, 4 heads, 1 head and 4 tails, or just 5 tails. However, microstates are how they actually are organized. So we could have all 5 heads. So there's only one microstate for the 5 heads. But there are 5 microstates for the 4 heads, 1 tail. And there's even more for the 3 heads, 2 tails. So you're much more likely to get these less organized states. So if we take that idea, we can say entropy is K, which is Boltzmann's constant, times the natural log of the number of microstates in the system. W here is the number of microstates in the system. Using these statistics, life spontaneously developing is essentially impossible. Even to get the appropriate proteins or RNA or DNA put together randomly to actually make something useful, some useful genes, it's essentially impossible. However, the evolutionists say, oh, well, life exists, thus it must have happened. Sure, I can say the same thing. Life exists, thus God made it happen. But whether or not you believe God made it happen or that it just took some miracle and one out of a quadrillion chance of happening, you can still be a good experimental scientist. You can still do all the experiments, be a great scientist, whether or not you believe in God. I believe the universe is created, highly organized by God, and then after Eden, after creation, things have fallen apart. That's it for today. Have a good day.